Okay, how's it going? So we're gonna be creating a basically. I'm gonna be showing you how to create a array, sort of like Mobx doesn't really use arrays. They use maps, like a new map method. So you need to understand how to use this thing here. I'll link it in the description below so you can learn it. Right? It's a version of array, but it's map. So you see, you're mapping. In array, this would be index, and this would be value. So this would be 0, whatever the value is. Like, I don't know, a dog. This would be 2, cat, right? So what you can do is map.get, for example, 1 will show you a dog. Map.to will show you a cat, right? So it's exactly the same as an array, only you get to decide what the index name is going to be, right? And as opposed to using the dot notation, right? In an index, when you're using array, you have to put array name, square brackets, and the index, right? In maps, you use map name dot get and then the index name. That's it. You see, other than that, there's literally no difference. No, another one is you cannot iterate through it by using array. That map method. You can only use like things like object keys and stuff like that, right? So you need to get used to it. It's slightly different to an array. It's the same concept, only a bit more complex. So once you understand that, we're moving on to Mobx, right? Okay. So we're gonna create a object, a map with to-do items in it, right? So let me just draw it out maybe. Oh man, it's so complex. It's so complex. I hope you're not gonna get confused. So we're gonna have like a state, basically, right? And that state is gonna be a map, which is an object by default. And inside that object, we're gonna have mapping, which is going to look something like this. So 1 is gonna be mapped to an object, which will have ID in it, name, and is done. Obviously, all of them will have some form of values, right? So then we're gonna have, whoops. So there's gonna be like 2, and then we're gonna have again ID, name, is done. So do you see, like, this is kind of like an array, only indexes are something that you decide yourself. And that's the idea. And then we're gonna pull values out of here, and we're gonna console log the name in the console log. That's it. That's what we're gonna do using Mobx. So the first thing to do, we need to create a model for ID, name, and is done. All right. Now I hope you read through the Mobx documentation. Otherwise, this will confuse absolute shit out of you, right? Okay. So we need to create a model. So we're gonna call it single to do item. Okay. Single to do item. It's gonna be types model. And then we do our usual, which is ID, types, optional. Actually, no. We're gonna do types, and then it's gonna be identifier number. I think it's like this. You can put it as a number, doesn't matter. But normally in Mobx, you put ID. If it's identifier, it's types identifier number. But you can put it as a number if you want. It makes no difference, right? Well, it makes a difference, but I mean, in the grand scheme of things, in tutorials, if you're learning, it doesn't make a difference. Now then, we're gonna have a name of to-do item, which is gonna be types, optional, and then we're gonna have. Now the reason why we do that, we want to set a default value. types string like this. Now you can do types string by itself, but then you will not be able to set up a default value, right? So what I'm saying is you can type this in type string, but then you cannot set the default value. Does that make sense? So if you want to set the default value, you need to put types optional, then types string and default value. This way you are assigning default value to name, which is empty string. And then is done is gonna be, again, we want to set a default value, so optional boolean false, right? Again, we can type types boolean by itself, but we won't be able to set a default value. So that's our interface kind of done. So the next thing we need to do is we need to create a root store. Okay, const root store equals types model, right? So, and in here we're gonna have a to-do list. So we're gonna actually name it to-do list, right? So it's gonna be again types optional, because optional includes array and an object. Okay, you're gonna have to get used to those types and optionals. It's a little bit, I know you're probably a React developer or JavaScript developer, it's a little bit mumbo jumbo, but I mean, in the end you get there. Just stick with it, right? So we need types map, right? So this is a map of these guys here. So this map will consist of items of this interface. Okay, so this tells that this to-do list is gonna be an object or array, because optional counts as object and array, consisting of a map consisting of these guys. ID, name, is done. And again, because we're using type optional, we need to set default value. So it's gonna be an empty map. Does that make sense? So what we told, that this state, which is called to-do list, will consist of interface, which is ID name is done, which is this here. And there's gonna be loads of them, which is optional. Like, I know optional is confusing as shit, but it's gonna consist of, because you see, map is not really an object, it's not really an array, it's like a thing of itself, so you need to put optional. If you put array, I don't think it's going to work. Maybe object is going to work. Maybe we can just put object like this. I'm not sure if it's going to work, but let's try. Okay, so final is we need to create an instance of the store. In Mobx, you always have to do that, so you can use the store. Right, so now we're going to do let's go my store 2 equals root store create. Now in here we have an option, right? Let's do export default my store 2. Okay. So now this is exportable. Now in here we have an option to put a default value. So at the moment we're gonna leave it as nothing. Right? Actually no, let's just create a something. Okay, so here is where it gets a little bit confusing, right? Because normally when you use the map, you have to use a set method. But because we're using it through Mobx, you can actually just hard code values into here. Alright, so we can kind of, ID is going to be 1, name is going to be new task 1, let's say. And then this is going to be is done. Actually, you see, if you skip the value, you see there is default value here, and you do not declare it, it will automatically set it to whatever is in here. So you can kind of save a bit of time. So we're going to do one with is done false, right? And we're going to do the second one without the which is gonna be, and we're gonna skip on is done. Now, if you're wondering how do I have so much autocomplete, I'm using tab 9. Tab 9 AI Assistant extension is free. Use it. Alright, so now our store is ready. We have kind of default values in it. So now we want to see it in console log. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is you need to import the store. Import my store 2 from, where is it? It's probably in stores. And it's in my store 2. Okay, so there it is. Now the second thing you need to import, remember, we're working with Mobx, so you need an observer, I think it's called, right? Import observer from Mobx React, like this. So this observer, every time something, this observer allows you to see the state. Basically, every time you want to use store inside the React component, you have to wrap it with a observer. You can do it in 2 ways. You can do it like this, right? Or you can do it like this as well. It's also going to work. Like this, observer. Now use whichever syntax you like. Makes no difference. Okay, so the next problem we're gonna run into, I'll show you the problem actually, right? So now in theory our store is ready to use, right? So look, I'm gonna console log my store 2 and then to do list. And you'll see we're gonna run into some problems. It's a little bit slow, but just bear with it, right? You see? Now it's complaining about this here. So we cannot use object, we have to use optional, I think, right? Whoopsie, whoopsie, whoopsie. Yeah. So you see, now we are reading off the store in to-do list. But you see, it's just a bunch of mumbo jumbo and it's like observable. Right? You cannot even map it. So for example, let's say we want to, let's just, let's say we want to map it, right? Map element name. You see? It doesn't work. Basically, I know it's going to fail, so I'll, while we're waiting, yeah, you see it's failing, basically. This is because map by itself is not iterable through .map method. You have to use object keys or something like that, right? Furthermore, not only is it a map, it's also a observable. So to get the values out of it, right, think about it as an array, right? We want to get the values out of this array. There is a special like add-on, comes with Mobx by itself, and it's called values from Mobx, right? So this is exactly as you may think. It allows you to get the values that are observable from the map, that are like it fixes this error basically. right? And the way you use it is you have to wrap it around store and the actual to-do list, not around the map. Okay, so remember, we have to, I'll type it out so you don't get confused. So we type values, okay? Now, my store 2 dot to-do list, okay? When you're going to reload it, it will still show you mumbo jumbo, that it's observable. But the difference is because it's wrapped in values, you can now map it, right? So now map, element, and then element.name. So now we should be able to see two names, which are whatever, new to-do list 1, new to-do list 2, I think. And past this point, you can actually use it. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can just put it in here, and then you can just map through it, right? Oh my god, something is not working. 1 second. Be right back. 1 second. Oh, whoopsie. I figured out what the problem is. So, to create, we made an error inside the... in here. You see, we didn't assign. So this should be to-do list. Like this. Oh, shite. Scheiße. Okay, so this should be... Actually, we just need to... So we need to remove this... Oh, whoops. We need to remove this object. Curly brackets. To-do list. So this is going to be now the default value. Okay, so now it's going to work. I'm certain. So now we're going to reload. And it should then work. Now this is a pin extension. So it puts your whichever window on top of any other window. So you see you can click around, it always stays on top. It's pin extension, it's pin for desktop, I think it's called. It's pretty good. So now you see, now we can see the values that are inside of our store. And that's about it. Now you can use them in here, you know, if you want. Okay, take care. That's how you do it.